welcome.
Thank you.
And I've been so excited to have you on because I've been using your unit. I've used the MP. I've used other. My wife's a physical therapist. I've used other eStim units, but I think that it's been this elusive concept of this eStim, and I was just hoping that maybe from talking to you, you can lend some information, some guidance, about eStim, the principles of it, and perhaps then we can even get into the newbie and how that works, and how we could talk about things like spasticity and muscle strength, and I'm almost going to let you lead, and people will chime in and ask questions, but this is such a new and exciting concept, especially for something with chronic diseases. I know you're special. I don't know especially, but I know you generally do sports injuries and neuro rehabilitation with the sports injuries. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about what your clinic and what your what your founding devices, etc. Just to go in a little bit of an intro.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of my background, I came at this from a little bit of a non-traditional background in the sense that I was actually originally an engineer and physics major, master's degree in engineering, and I'd always really been interested in the human body and physiology, but based on the first early experiences I had, I didn't think that the traditional, going to physical therapy school was really the thing for me, or medical school. And so I just wanted to be an engineer and solve problems. That was kind of my thing. And then I had an experience where back when I was playing, I played, I was on the practice squad on the college ice hockey team, which even that for me was an accomplishment. And I had an injury. I had some torn ligaments in my wrist. I was supposed to be out of commission for a few months and have surgery. And I just through fortunate circumstances, I met a functional neurologist, and by taking a more neurological approach, looking at muscle activation and neurological patterns, the protective patterns and inhibition and the different things that were going on around there, and getting the muscles to turn on and stabilize appropriately and increase blood flow and all the things we were doing. It was an amazing experience for me because I saw my ligaments heal without surgery. I was back in 2.5 weeks instead of 3 months.
Wow.
And so that was, I was already set at that time to go to engineering graduate school, but that really was a big light bulb going off moment for me. And so I ended up, during that next summer, instead of being in the engineering lab, I went and apprenticed. And when I learned all of this stuff, kind of some of the foundational concepts that now inform our work, it really lit a passion inside of me, or allowed me to actually see a way that I could take this passion and maybe make a career out of it. And so I started working with a couple practitioners in Austin, Texas, here where I came for grad school and have been living ever since then. And from what I learned from a few very impactful mentors, I started doing some earlier versions of this work. I ended up going back to school for a PhD program in neuromuscular physiology, so neuroscience and motor learning.
Sure.
And then I ended up, as everything evolved, I ended up taking a leave of absence from that program in order to launch the device. So I haven't completed that doctorate yet, but made progress towards it, and have been able to apply a lot of that knowledge to our device and to training other practitioners to use it, and to this the clinical setting that we have here. And it's been really cool to see that be applied.
Yeah, I got a chance to use your device a little bit, and I'm utterly impressed because I've used it a bunch of different units, and one with 9-volt batteries, et cetera, et cetera. So can you just touch base, because when the original rehab was a unit like yours, or was it a traditional, like a handheld eStim kind of unit, or?
So what we definitely older versions of what we have now. A lot of that work was manual techniques and different things that, for muscle activation and some of the things that we now are able to do with the machine now that the technology has evolved. And so, there's some differences which I think it would be good to talk about, like the difference between direct current and alternating current, and
Yes,
the effects that this has on the nervous system, because
absolutely.
that's really what allows us to have the different effect on the nervous system that we have, and that's really what makes it so valuable. And so
Yeah,
part
can
of
you speak to
the
that a little bit? Yeah, go ahead. That's
yeah, so part of a big part of it is that our device has, in many ways, a different effect on the body than traditional e-stim. So traditional e-stim is very output based in the sense that it is sending a signal with the purpose of causing muscles to, and it's doing some of the work for you, for the person, and
yes, yes,
it's very very output focused. It's focused on contraction, and
yes.
part of that has to do with the fact that it's alternating current. So as that signal goes back and forth, it causes muscles on both sides of the joint to co-contract and fight against each other, and so you end up.
So both by the joints. So let's say bicep, tricep, both but muscles that are contracting and extending.
Yeah, they'll both, as that signal volleys back and forth in an alternating current device, you'll get the muscles on both sides to co-contract and fight against each other, and so
Okay.
you can actually reinforce inefficient movement patterns. You can reinforce stiffness, spasticity. You can there certainly is some benefit. I'm not saying there's no benefit, but I am saying that there is a low ceiling on what you can accomplish, because the amount of current you can get in is limited because there's so much contraction that happens. It's so
I could
output focused.
I could speak to that. I've played with it for years. I've used a bunch of different units. My wife's a physical therapist.
Hmm.
I didn't see, I don't want to say I didn't see a result, but I didn't really see noticeable changes, not like your unit. So what makes, yeah, so now we got alternating current, old unit off, let's say a 9-volt battery or some type of low voltage source, or if that's even the word, versus yours is direct current. Is that based on like old Russian
It's
type of,
direct current, and yeah, it is. The earlier versions of this, some of the seeds of this were planted by the work that the Soviets did. They found some benefits of direct current on the body, but
interesting.
they always had the problem that they would burn the skin. And so when
Okay.
we talk to people who are physical therapists who went through school 20 or 30 years ago, and we tell them it's direct current, they say, well, what do you do about the burning? And
Right.
that's because that's
As
historically what the problem was.
as my wife would say, she goes, "Oh no, no, we don't use direct current." Okay.
Yeah.
So
And so
yes,
we've been to, as technology has advanced, been able to find ways to get that direct current into the body using a special carrier frequency, so there's no stinging or burning of the skin. It actually feels very smooth, especially with some of the most recent improvements we've added.
I could speak to that as well. So how does that? All right. So now, all right. So now we got alternating and direct current. So how does that affect um, the rehab? And so you have the direct current now, and we're talking about stimulating a specific muscle. How does that not co-contract, or how does that benefit? If you could speak to that a little bit.
So yeah, I think this is really the heart of the issue when you talk about the differences physiologically and neurologically, because with ours, and you can tell me if you've had this experience with ours, you can turn the machine up to the same or greater level where it feels as or more intense,
Yes,
but because of the frequencies, the fact that it's direct current, because of all the characteristics of the waveform, it doesn't cause the same level of protective contraction, and so you can relax through it and move through it, and
absolutely. That I
and
have
that's
experienced.
that's another way of saying you can get greater levels of input of sensory receptor stimulation because you're able to get more current into the body with less of that protective contraction. You can get more signal in, and you can preferentially, not exclusively, not binary one or zero, but preferentially create a greater sensory input, sensory stimulus into the nervous system. So it's more, we're focusing more on the sensory side than the motor side, And the interesting thing about that, from a neurological perspective, is that when your body gets the proper sensory inputs, it is able to make better motor outputs on its own. So some of us, we may have heard the saying garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
The opposite is also true. Great information in, better output, better information out.
Just to back you up a little bit, can you speak to the perfective reflex? Because that's very interesting to me because I find it, let's say, in a multiple sclerosis patient, and let's say we're trying to move our leg. Sometimes with spasticity, I got my quad and my hamstring both contracting at the same time. And so
Mm-hmm.
would you consider that a body almost protective reflex where it's trying to, well, through an upper motor neuron lesion, I suppose. Is that what you're referring to when you say protective reflex, or are you referring to the current specifically?
So there's a couple. I'm kind of speaking to two things at once.
Okay.
One is the the same types of protective patterns that happen. Think about like after a trauma. If you were playing in a football game and you sprained your ankle, your
Yes.
body, as the sprain is a partial tearing of those ligaments, and one of the things your body's going to do is stiffen and contract around that injury because your body thinks, oh my gosh, this ankle could be rolled again or these tissues could be attacked again at any moment. And
Understood.
so the stiffening and the protective contractions are useful if that tissue is going to be attacked again, but they're also counterproductive for movement because the stiffer they are, the less they're able to move. Counterproductive for movement and for healing because when they're contracting like that, they're going to cut off blood flow and reduce the ability of the body to heal naturally. So
Okay.
there's protective contractions like that. That's usually how the body develops, inappropriate movement patterns over time. MS, of course, can be a profound influence, different than a trauma, where that the nervous system signaling because of an autoimmune attack and things like that. Obviously a little bit of a different situation, but and from a foundational level, that's the type of protective reaction that I'm talking about from trauma, from surgery, and it's the same types of responses that happen with traditional e-stim, and that's why there's a lower ceiling on what you can accomplish with it. You can't do quite as much as with the type that we have and this kind of paradigm that I'm proposing here.
Okay. So I've used traditional e-stim unit, and let's say I'm working. Let's just say, for example, just to make it simple, like I'm working bicep, and I'll crank up that, let's say, an MP unit, not to pick on any specific unit, of course, but and so it'll contract. It'll actually move my arm for me. Um, Whereas when I have your unit, I feel that the muscle work and I actually can see it working, but I have to activate that muscle. It won't
Mm-hmm.
do the work for me in most circumstances unless I fool around with the settings and I might get a contraction.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so is that what you're talking about? And it doesn't activate generally the muscle that I'm not working with. It doesn't cross into it.
So yeah, what I'm really trying to get across to people is this difference where, like you said, it's not the machine's not doing the work for you. You are. With traditional e-stim, sometimes the the patient becomes reliant on the device to do the work for them. And when you take the device off, you're not necessarily any better off than you were
Yes.
beforehand because you're still sort of reliant on it to do the work for you.
They've even developed these very expensive units like BioNest, in which would it let's if a foot drop, they
Mm-hmm.
would work to actually lift your foot, so you have to do nothing. You just turn on the unit and with a heel strike and it would work. But
Mm-hmm.
and so I remember the doctor convincing me that well this is also neuro rehab, but it really in my opinion no it didn't. I didn't see any noticeable lasting results. As soon as I took the unit off, go back to a non-functioning muscle.
And so that is kind of the traditional approach with FES and NMES, or there's the using the device, having the device do it for you. And it's sort of like working out in the gym, in the sense that over time, with thousands and thousands and thousands of reps, you can probably get to do it better. But what I'm proposing is that instead of having the machine do the output for you, I'm proposing having the machine give your body the inputs that it needs so that it can do the work better. So it's kind of a new version of neuromuscular reeducation, where
Certainly. Okay. I'm just kind of put in perspective the multiple sclerosis, which is different than what you're talking about. I know you're talking about different injuries and etc. So multiple sclerosis might have an upper motor neural lesion, like maybe a lesion of the brain or spinal cord. So in my opinion, or from my knowledge, it kind of the signal's confused. But when I put your unit on, it seems like it. I hate to use override, but maybe work through that. So through repeated use, you think that the unit with that direct current will help decrease the spasticity or actually increase neuroplasticity, which would be my goal, right? If I could find something that would increase neuroplasticity.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the, I'm glad you mentioned spasticity. That's the part I wanted to kind of tie back into when I was talking about those protective contractions that happen after trauma.
Great.
That is sort of the same type of thing as spasticity, where the body is constantly sending the signal to create excessive contractions, excessive tension, and that's modulated. It's like a set point within the nervous system. And by going through our assessment process, we can find where those thresholds are hypersensitive, so to speak, or where some of those issues are. And then by working those areas, we can help change the pattern, which can break through that protective contraction that's happening after trauma. It can also start to change some of the dynamics that are holding that spasticity in place. And so absolutely what you're talking about is one of the keys, neuroplasticity. And in order to make neuroplastic changes in the body, the body needs to see stimulus that's significant enough. It needs to see that stimulus frequently enough, and that stimulus needs to be important for the person. They need to they need to be paying attention to it and have a kind of a psychological, mental priority.
Okay, yes.
They have to kind of give it priority in the brain.
Okay, well, let's just back up a little bit, because what really turned me on to you, I know my weak areas. My weak areas were my abs, my anterior tibs, which helps, your foot, when you talk about foot drop, guys, your toes, that's what we speak to. And so I would say, and my hamstrings and parts of my back. So you did a diagnostic on me, and you ran around the machine, and you nailed every single one of my weak points within 5 minutes, maybe less. And so I'm like, whoa, like. So explain that. Like, how did your machine, or how were you able to diagnose? I mean, I don't know if diagnose is the right word, but you were able to find the problem areas.
Yeah. So yeah, we would call it an assessment, just to avoid the.
Yes.
There's a lot of connotations around diagnosis, right? So,
sorry about that. Yeah, we're not diagnosing, but we're assessing. That's wonderful. Yes, I like that much better.
So in that process, what we're doing, remember, we're trying to preferentially send more of a sensory signal. And so whenever we move, like if I'm moving my arm here, even if my eyes are closed, my brain knows what's happening because of that proprioception, the kinesthetic sense, those sensory signals that are coming back to my brain. And so, my theory on how this is all working is that because we're able to preferentially send more of a sensory signal, as we scan the electrode around on the body, we're sending the same signals, mimicking movement. And so if you can move properly and have been moving properly, then your body will see that and say, oh, that's just Ron's leg doing what it normally does. That's no big deal.
Okay.
But then if we're on an area and we're sending the signal as if something is moving and it hasn't been moving in a while, it's been stuck or it's been inhibited or there's been excessive tension and it's been not, unable to move, then that signal is going to be new, it's going to be different, it's going to be threatening to the nervous system, and there's going to be a reaction against it. So we're looking for that reaction, which is essentially a protective response. The same type of that we were discussing that could happen after an ankle sprain, for example, or the same type of protective response that it's sort of like the neurological pattern that would hold a spasticity in place, where you're just kind of trying to protect an area. It's the same sort of underlying pattern.
Let me just break it down to my experience, guys, just so you know. So I went to him, and I have trouble with my hamstrings. I have trouble with my anterior tips. Maybe I have trouble with my abs. And he was able to take a kind of a moist pad and rub it around my body. And he would go over certain areas. And I would feel nothing. And then when he would come to my weak areas, like my abs or my anterior tips, I would feel discomfort. And not horrible discomfort, but it was noticeable. And so in every area in which I was weak or had trouble with, that I've been working on for the longest time with physical therapy, he hit right then. And so kind of blew my mind a little bit. So that's just pretty just profound to me. So how do we assess those areas? We don't diagnose, but we assess those areas, and we found, all right, now these muscles are not quite cooperating the way that we want to. So how can we take your unit? Because this is a juxta to multiple sclerosis. If we could take and we could retrain muscles to work, to perhaps, in my medical training, perhaps create neuroplasticity where, all right, so multiple sclerosis, what are we talking about? Multiple scars, either in your brain or your spinal cord, because it's a central nervous system disorder. So we're not talking about like an injury, a sports injury. So do you theorize by continued use, proper intensity, and hitting the right areas, that we can actually stimulate nerve plasticity? I guess I don't want to say nerve growth, but maybe we stimulate the brain to plasticity, meaning plastic, change. Does that make sense?
So sorry, my connection broke up a little bit there, but I think I heard most of it about are we stimulating neuroplastic changes?
Yeah, for example, let's say I have a lot of people, let's say multiple sclerosis, they have foot drop, right? So if we were going to work on that muscle, and we use the proper intensity and we do it, with neuroplastic type change. This is something we have to do repetitively, right? Mm-hmm. This isn't a 1 or 2, 3 time. This is something you would have to do multiple times. So by doing that, do you think, because neuroplastic change, it's not as simple. This is a paradigm shift in multiple sclerosis treatment. So, is that what you're theorizing, that through your unit, we could stimulate the brain in such a way that it'll be able to kind of be neuroplastic? I hate to use the word nerve growth, but
yeah.
What do you say about that?
That's a great question, and I think that's kind of an obvious next step in the line of thinking that we certainly hope that happens. And I can't yet, I can't make claims that our technology regenerates nerves, or that would be kind of an off-label thing. But
sure.
What I can say is that we've seen some incredible changes happen. At the very least, based on the current science, we have to believe that at least there's changes in neurological transmission and communication at synapses and junctions, and that some of the thresholds are being changed. I do believe, based on some of the things that we've seen, that that in the long term there are definitely neuroplastic changes. Whether that means, lesions this changing or not, I can't say, but there are definitely some changes happening. And the one thing that I can say with 100% confidence is that whatever opportunity the body has to make neuroplastic changes, whatever bandwidth there is to adapt, the only way to access it is to get enough stimulation in on a regular basis in order to stimulate the body to adapt and to fulfill that, or to actually take advantage of that opportunity. And so this is definitely a necessary step, and or something like this is a necessary step to give the body a chance to do whatever it will be able to do.
Well, I'll make two statements, and I'll do them separately because they're totally different statements. But the one thing I did notice when I first started using a unit, my legs felt freer. It felt like, let's say I'm trying to walk up the stairs. It felt like my hamstring and my quad was contracting at the same time. So it was always a fight to kind of relax and contract at the same time. And I noticed from the use of your unit when I first started that was a tremendous change. Not that it alleviated totally, but it just felt freer. And is that what you're talking about the changes as far as the protective reflex being kind of ameliorated or downgraded?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the exact kind of thing. That's almost the exact words I would like to use to describe the differences in how the body responds to this compared to traditional e-stim. Because that,
Yes, yes,
when we were talking about alternating current and how that's, as that signal goes back and forth, it causes the co-contractions. It actually reinforces that same state where you felt your muscles
yes,
fighting against each other.
yes,
And
yes.
so that is the exact same thing we're trying to break. And I think that's really from a pattern of from a perspective of neurological control and movement patterns. I think that what you touched on right there is really the biggest difference, and why this paradigm and this new approach to e-stim is valuable.
I'm just so excited about this because it's probably been 15 years I've been in different physical therapy. My wife doesn't generally treat me as a physical therapist because I don't listen as well. you know. But anyways, so I had some. She's a great physical therapist, but I had some really great physical therapists. So we would use the e-stim, and he would have me or she, depending on who it was. So we would hook up, let's say, the anterior tip, and the whole idea. So this is traditional e-stim. So now my foot is moving. I'm not doing anything, but they would have me, as you said, supposedly think about it and try to. We use the word co-contract, like I'm contracting with the
Mm-hmm.
contraction from the unit.
Okay.
Um, but we did that over and over and over again, and I saw no lasting results. Now, when I use your unit and I contract with it, and I'm done, it feels like I had the strongest gym workout ever because I can't produce that in the gym because my muscles won't let me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, because
Yeah.
the muscle is sore as if I, let's say 20 years ago, I was in the military doing whatever, like that, I felt that soreness. So when I feel that soreness, I attribute that to muscle growth, but also has to. What does it come first, the muscle or the nerve? I don't think you can separate those. I think that those have there's not one or the other. It has to be both.
So the I think the biggest kind of takeaway that we'll all probably agree on is that when you get sore like that, it's because your muscles are being overloaded and working harder than they have before. They're doing more work, working at a higher level,
Hmm.
uh, and the current theories have to do mostly with because as the muscles work harder, particularly if they're working eccentrically, there's micro trauma and breakdown of muscle fibers, and then the inflammatory response is what leads to soreness. So I think that's a fairly well accepted theory, but the soreness is definitely an indicator that you've been working harder than your muscles had been before, and that's a good
along
thing.
it is a good thing
Yeah.
because I also notice along with that is a neural fatigue. So that within a couple of days goes away. So I'll have that muscle soreness, but I'll also have neural fatigue in which I can't contract like I used to, but after a few days, that contraction returns and it feels stronger. So I don't know if that's, and I don't think we'll ever know, but if there's that a nerve growth thing or a neuroplastic thing, but it just seems like it's it's more alive.
Mm-hmm. Well, then the interesting component to that too is that, in a lot of times in life, there's this pattern of we want to deplete the body, and then that becomes a signal for it to supercompensate and adapt and come back
Yes.
stronger. So when you have some fatigue, that can be productive because that is a signal for the body to adapt, to build back up to a higher level so that it can more effectively meet the next challenge.
Okay, so to speak to that, in medical school, I still remember the neurology class in which and they probably can never do this now because it probably would violate some type of ethical principles. But they had a monkey and they severed the nerve. You know what I'm talking about? And they
Mm-hmm.
severed the nerve, and I don't know if it was the arm. It's been a long time. And then so and the other side they didn't do anything to, but this side they severed the nerve, so the nerve is covered. And they took a wheel and they just ran on it, and for days and days and months probably, and eventually that nerve grew around the lesion.
Mm-hmm.
But we used to think that once the nerve is damaged, it can never return. Like that, that was the initial thought in my experience.
Yeah.
But now, if we
And
take yes,
that I think that should be a big aha moment and a big takeaway for people to really to provide hope and to inspire hope beca-
yes, yes.
because we are much more malleable and adaptable, and we can change and regenerate and grow a lot more than most people give us credit for. We have a lot of power as human beings.
So next step. I'm at the Cleveland Clinic or Mayo Clinic. I don't know. I went to everywhere, and I believe it was a French neurologist, and he said in order to induce neuroplasticity, it has to be something you do every day.
Mhm.
And because like you spoke to this just a minute ago, it has to be repetitive, it has to be a proper intensity, and it has to be a proper form and function. No,
Yeah, absolutely.
so there's a lot, and we're speaking to the MS community. So I mean, typically, hamstrings, quads, um, it's kind of anterior tibialis, which is the foot flop.
Mhm.
So a foot drop, not flop. So, yeah, it feels like a foot flop.
It
I'm
kind of
telling
looks
you,
can look like it. It can be
it
tough.
does, and I had that for a long time, and I don't have it anymore. Not only with your machine, that was through different things like walking in the pool, et cetera, things like that. So I've witnessed it, and actually, um, I can speak to my speech. I used to not be able to speak. I would stutter, I would slur, and that came back. And the neurologist even told me before that I knew neurologists like that they act as that's impossible. So what makes me excited about your unit is if we're providing the stimulus and we're doing the proper form and function and intensity, then why wouldn't it just seems like that would be the next step, that if we do it enough, if we do it properly, that we could regain those things that we've lost with, oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to make the point, with proper nutrition
Mhm.
and with proper, well, you could bring in mindfulness, you could bring in just all the different, if you could provide all the proper conditions, which isn't easy, then that would be the next step. It just seems that way, as far as it would theorize or hypothesize.
Yeah, and one of the points to add there is if for instance you're trying to put the body in an environment where it can have neuroplastic changes and potentially regrow neurological anatomical structures, one of the building blocks that you need, if you're talking about myelin, for example, myelin is made up primarily of fat. And so dietary fat, large amounts of dietary fat,
Yes,
is a very,
absolutely.
very important piece of the
Spot
equation there. Yeah.
spot on. Okay, so we'll bring it even further. So they have in Atlanta, we have the Shepherd Center, and they deal with a lot of war injuries. So
Mhm.
let's say you'd have a severed, well, you could even have a spinal injury. So they put the patients in robotic suits that stimulate proper function and motion. And they even have like a team. Let's say if you weren't in a robotic suit, that you would just be on a treadmill, and they'd have probably four physical therapists or four type of therapists that would help actually plant your foot and just walk through with you, and
Mhm.
just that duplicate that motion. But that's doing in more of a physical way where your unit is possible something that would really augment that whole idea. Um, for example, you and I were talking about my hamstrings are very, very weak. So for example, while we're using your unit, my wife helps me. Like I couldn't contract it myself. So if she contracts and I try to contract with it, I notice I'm gaining some. I hate to use the word strength because they feel strong, but more innervation. I guess maybe the
Mhm.
word would be.
Yeah. So I think there's two kind of parts to that. One is, you can do in order to make changes. Normally, it's going to take tens of thousands of reps or hundreds of thousands of reps. And with this, because we're amplifying the amount of signal and stimulus, maybe that 100,000 reps becomes 10 or 20,000 reps. So you still
Interesting.
absolutely have to put in the work. This just allows you to get a little more bang for your buck because there's a greater overall stimulus. And and then part of what you're experiencing there in terms of where you say you feel like you have the better innervation, sometimes sometimes the reason that your brain, this may sound a little funny at first, but sometimes the reason your brain can cause you to contract your leg muscles as effectively is because it's not getting the sensory signals from your leg muscles, and so it's almost like it doesn't know where the leg is, and so if it can't find it, it can't trigger it as effectively. And so by increasing the signal from the leg muscles, for example, sometimes that gives you a better opportunity to create a better output signal to those areas. And so this notion of providing the sensory inputs becomes very important. And I'm sorry if I'm getting too neurological, but it's just to me it's really kind of the key of the process.
I don't think you're getting too neurological because I think the folks listening are very astute. I mean, this is the juxt of multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
You have some inflammation, you have some damage for whatever reason. We don't really know. We could theorize why, but for whatever reason. And so now what we do is through diet and exercise, we try to really create that neuroplastic. But without that stimulus, I mean, it's a very difficult task.
Mhm.
And so, they even talk about, well, we'll have lion's mane mushroom or, well, all these things are help augment neuroplasticity. But to me, that's kind of in a hocus pocus kind of way. Well, for me, who's like kind of a type A, I like to be proactive in this rather than just, I'm going to take this, I'm going to hope because, okay. But just to back up a little bit, just to kind of clarify things for folks, when you design this for sports injuries or for injuries, not definitely with not multiple sclerosis in mind. You were thinking,
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And it was definitely more for I had been an athlete, and that was kind of my tribe, and so that was kind of the people who I first set out to help. But at the same time, I saw how important it was to take a more neurological approach to even to issues that were traditionally just in the realm of orthopedic medicine, and so because of that neurological approach, because people knew how focused we were on that neurological approach, that ended up attracting people who had neurological conditions, some with spinal cord injuries, some of course with MS, traumatic brain injuries, that inspired some people dealing with those challenges to seek us out. And since then, we've thankfully and beautifully and wonderfully, we've seen some really beneficial changes, some really positive outcomes for people dealing with those neurological challenges. We've seen how this work has helped some people get out of wheelchairs, or helped some people return to activities of daily living with greater ease, or gain the ability to do some things that they couldn't do before, or reduce pain and improve quality of life. And sometimes, sometimes something is so severe that we can't help, but most of the time we can help, whether it takes a really long time or it happens fairly quickly. Most of the time, the stimulating the nervous system will cause changes and adaptations to happen. And it depends on how much the person is able to adapt. For some people, they have a lot of room for improvement, and their body will support a lot of change. And for some people, they can only do little bits. So in some ways, you kind of have to go through the process to know how far or how much we can help someone. But it's
So I'll say another two things. I'm really big on diet.
mhm.
Through the Dr. Wahls, or even through Ashton Embry's The Best Spot Diet. And so to me, it seems like if you could cut back, if you could provide the proper environment, and I know I like to use the word garden when I'm talking about the biome, but we can use the proper garden for nerves as well. If we could provide the proper environment for them to grow, or I hate to use the word grow, but to maybe reinnovate or wake up, it would just seems to me this is rather absolutely profound that this could be something. So just very excited by it. One thing I did want to ask you, because when I first started using the unit, I was talking to one of your therapy. I don't know what I would describe it. Well, one of your assistants. We talk about the reset, and we would induce, because I've been studying functional medicine now, and the first thing we study is we take a patient's in the sympathetic state, the fight or flight state, and we put them in the parasympathetic state, which is a healing state, because you can't heal in this sympathetic state. Like if the rabbit's running away from the fox, he's not worried about healing.
Mhm.
He's just how does that? Because that's also profound. We put units either around your neck, all the way down your toes, and it's rather comforting. You could almost meditate while that's on. So, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So that is another of the biggest differences. There's a little bit of a theme where, in many ways, this approach is kind of the opposite. Direct current as opposed to alternating current, preferentially more of a sensory input as opposed to purely motor output. And then another difference is preferentially promoting sympathetic activity rather than sympathetic. So with traditional E-stim units, usually people will see an increase in sympathetic, like fight or flight, which
Yes.
would be a decrease in HRV.
Yes.
Whereas on ours, thankfully, we see almost all the time, almost every time, thankfully, we see the opposite, where HRV goes up, and of course from that we infer that the parasympathetic nervous system is activating, and that the body's in a state where it can heal and adapt and regenerate if possible, and grow, and all these wonderful things. And so there, part of it has to do with the general effect of this type of waveform, the direct current as opposed to the alternating current. And then on that particular protocol that you're talking about, what we're doing is trying to do a couple things. One is to to stimulate areas that are very densely and very richly innervated, so that you're getting a lot of input in some key areas, and on that particular protocol. And that is something that we've just found over time tends to, we thought those areas might be valuable because they're a very target-rich environment. They're so richly innervated that we thought that, neck, hands, feet, solar plexus, some of those areas where there's so many nerves, those are all ones that we tend to work in order to get a more profound global response within the body. And so when you do it at that level where it's kind of comfortable, you can chill through it. It really amplifies that shift into the parasympathetic mode.
It's I keep using the word profound because I can't find a better word than that, but it's profoundly interesting to me. Okay, so I don't want to take a lot more of your time. I've already like stole like hours of your time. Sorry.
It's all
And
good. It's just fun. I'm loving it.
all right. Well, your wife's probably like mine, and she's like, tapping in. So, how does a patient access this? I know they could buy a unit, or they can. They are physical therapists trained on this, or what are the ways that they could access this type of?
Yeah.
Besides going to Austin, I consider going to Austin to be trained
Hey,
further.
well, I'll take you out for barbecue too.
Oh yeah, you guys got a great barbecue place. I've never been, but I've watched that. It's
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, I watched that on TV. Yes.
So there's a couple options. At this point, the technology is still fairly new, and so it's mostly in clinics and places where people can buy the unit and use it professionally. There's definitely people who have rented or bought the unit, but there's a learning curve to do it, and so the best bet, at least to start, is usually to find a practitioner. So on our website, there's a list of
Oh,
practitioners around the country. It's being added to.
excellent.
Um, the website is new.fit, NEU, like neurological, new.fit/locations. Um, so that's on there. And then if there's not one near you and you're listening to this, please do mention it to your physical therapist or chiropractor or doctor. And if they're interested in bringing it on, then they can do it with you. If none of those options exist, we can either, if someone was really interested in trying this out, we could refer you to a practitioner somewhere else around the United States, or you could come and see us and get started with an evaluation and the first several sessions, kind of an intensive process. And then you could rent a unit and continue doing it at home. But it would definitely be the best bet to start with a skilled practitioner in person, go through the assessment process, because no two protocols are really the same for people. We want to give each person what they need to maximize the benefit, because everyone's nervous system is going to be different and need uh, sometimes just a little bit different things, or sometimes substantially different things.
Understood. So, you have a website. Well, first of all, I'll say I've searched YouTube and I watched it. You seem to have you or other folks have. There's a lot of YouTubes you can go and educate yourself on what we're talking about. And you're fuzzing out on us. I love on technology. Can you still hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. You look a little fuzzy, but that's okay. Website where people could go and at least get the initial information as you breaking up, but that's okay. What
Uh-oh.
would you? Yeah. Well, let's just. I'm just gonna
Can
ignore
you
it.
can you still can you still hear me?
I can hear you. If you can give the
Okay.
website, and I add in the show notes, I can post your website, and I also
Yeah,
post where that you said that you could find practitioners.
for sure. So the website is www.new.fit. So it's NEUFIT, NEU.FIT, no.com, just new.fit. And then from the homepage on the top right, there's a locations tab also. So you can click locations, and that'll show. There's also some others up there that are being added. And so there'll be more coming online. We have another training coming up in a couple of weeks, so even more will come online after that. So thankfully, there's more and more practitioners who have this, but still, unfortunately there may not be one super close to everyone who's listening in. So please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to talk with your local practitioners if they're interested in bringing on this technology. And we're excited to partner with people around the country and around the world who can work with people in their local communities and take this work to people that we can never reach from here in Texas.
Wonderful. Well, I've been using the unit and I'm really impressed. Um, and with multiple sclerosis, unfortunately, we do tend to lose a bit of hope. And so this type of technology, which is, again, I hate to reuse the word over and over, but profoundly exciting. So what I'll do in the show notes is that I'll go ahead, even though I can't see you anymore, I will go ahead and I'll put in your website and where people can learn more about it. And then we will, hopefully then they can go from there, and we'll continue the whole idea of this whole conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron. It's been a pleasure, and I really, really enjoyed being with you. I hope it was helpful for the folks in your community here listening in.
Well, it was very informative, and fortunately for people, we keep adding a little hope. We talk about diet, we talk about mindfulness. So now, if we could do electrical neural rehab, or and I don't even know if that's the proper terminology, but if we could do anything more to assist, I wish I could get your picture back. I don't know what happened, but it's very exciting, and so I urge everybody to learn about it. I've been using the machine. I rented the machine, and I'm finding it very, very useful. Thank you, and keep up the good work, because it's us folks here that just rely on people like you that keep innovating, keep moving forward, and keep giving us reason to not just to throw the towel in. So I do thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for doing the work you're doing to bring hope and inspiration to a lot of people out there. It's beautiful. You're making a very positive impact.
Thank you. I try. I try, but I'm just sharing my experiences in parroting things I've learned. So I'm definitely not a guru, but I definitely liked it when I learned, like people like you, or people like Dr. Wahls, or even Ashton Embry, or numerous other people. I like to bring that information to the folks so they can say, all right, there is hope. There is things I could do. I'm kind of a control freak, so if you give me A, B, and C, I'm going to do them. God, I don't know why your picture's gone, but anyways, thank you. And after this will be rebroadcast, and what I'm also going to do is I'm going to I'll post pictures of it, or pictures, but his website, as well as how you can find a practitioner, and then even if you go on YouTube and you search Newbie or Nuefit or Garrett, you will be able to watch weightlifters in different ways of people using the unit, and you'll appreciate what we're talking about. Thank you, Garrett. You have a good night.
You too, Ron. Thank you.
God bless everybody. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.